Welcome to a special edition of Medicine in Meadville. I'm Dwayne Kohler from Meadville Medical Center, and we are having our community conversation tonight, the Ask the Expert series, and our special guest is Dr. John Zeigler. We're going to hear about how to prevent those injuries from walking and running. So an important topic. Stay with us.
Welcome everybody. It's a little hard to get enthusiastic about running and walking right now when it's still snowing on the 10th of April. But yeah, I guess that's part of the problem is that, around here when the weather finally breaks, everybody gets really enthusiastic and they want to go outside and start walking and running again. But we've been cooped up inside for most of the winter. If not on a treadmill with sort of sensory deprivation in the meantime. But how many walkers do we have? Do we have walkers in here or runners? A couple runners and some walkers. So the topic is really a mixture of running and walking, and the two go together quite nicely from the standpoint of injuries and biomechanics and shoes. The two of them intermix, and a lot of the same injuries occur on both sides of that. But if you're going out for both of them, it's for the same reasons. You're going to go out for fitness, you're going to go out for weight loss, mental well-being, to be competitive. I talked to a group, and I was encouraging the ladies to take their kids out and go for a walk, get them out of the house and get away from the computer. And one of the ladies came up to me afterwards and says, I walk to get out of the house so that I get away from everything. And I thought, well, I can see that perspective too. So it's for your mental well-being no matter why you do it. But the enthusiasm this time of year is, the weather's going to break here about Friday or so, and Woodcock Dam's going to be beautiful. And so, it's a mile across Woodcock Dam and a mile back the other direction. And so what usually happens is, in great enthusiasm, you say, well, I'm going to go over and back, or I'm going over and back twice because it's such a nice evening. And, you wake up the next morning and your foot hurts. And it's usually arch pain or it's heel pain is what I see this time of year. And it's from, that enthusiastic start to the season with walking and the consequences of what happens if you do too much too fast. So there's things that you can control in it, and there's things that you can't control. So you can control how far you walk, how fast you walk. You can control what shoes you wear. You can't control the way you're built. You can't control your own biomechanics, the way that you walk or the way you run based on what you inherited. And so the two of those have to mix together in a way that it prevents you from having to stop your activity from injuries. And the idea of progressive fitness is that if you're going to build to a point and then you're injured, and what's going to happen? You take two steps backwards and you say, all right, I'm ready to go again, and you build up, and an injury stops you again. So the idea is to have a continuous build in fitness that's not interrupted by injuries. And so what I wanted to do was go through a few of the injuries and explain some of the ones that I see commonly. And then we'll talk about shoes and the way they're built and what we're seeing nowadays and some of the new things that are coming out in running and walking shoes that are pretty neat. And how to pick out a shoe that's best for you. And so you can walk into any shoe store in the end, walk up to the rack that's 6 feet high and 9 feet wide, and go through that rack and walk out of there with a shoe that is right for you, without the help of any salesperson who may or may not have your best interest in mind when you do that. So, as I alluded to earlier, one of the more common injuries that I see is heel pain. Someone comes in and they said, I walked Woodcock last week, I woke up the next day and I could barely put weight on my heel, and so I limped around for a while. Then it felt pretty good, and then I came home after work and sat down, and oh man, I couldn't get up after watching TV. So what's really happening is that because they were either wearing the wrong shoes, or they walked too far, or they weren't flexible enough, they overstretched the big ligament in the bottom of the foot, their plantar ligament. And that ligament attaches to the heel. And because it's attached to the heel, that attachment becomes really inflamed when that happens. And so every time they step down, it stretches the ligament, pulls in the heel, and they have pain. So what do you do about it? Well, the big thing is stretching. We all live long enough now that we get stiff. And so because of that, stretching out your calf muscles is really important for walking and for running. But for the walkers, it's the most common thing I see. And it just involves doing the wall stretch, which everybody has seen. Runners do, where you lean against the wall with your hands and put one foot backwards on the ground with your heel and your leg straight. And you hold that stretch for a minute or two. You say long enough to check the emails on your phone while you're doing it, okay? And by doing that, you're stretching out the calf muscle. You say, well, how does that help my foot? Well, it reduces the stress on the plantar fascial ligament. If you can stretch out the back of your leg, it's going to help with the stress on the bottom of your foot. So the real money stretch as soon as you're done. It's important maybe to stretch before you go out and you start your walk, but as soon as you're done running or work with your cycling or running, that's the time to take the 4 minutes, 2 minutes aside or so, and do your stretch for your calf muscles. And if you do that, that's the #1 preventative thing that you can do to prevent against the plantar fasciitis or heel pain. The other thing you can do is to look at your shoes. You can walk in running shoes, okay, but you can't run in walking shoes. So nowadays, most everybody's wearing walking shoes. And we'll look at designs of those a little bit later. But the walking shoes are not that much different from running shoes. I just usually tell people, go buy a good set of running shoes and make sure they're in good shape. So that you're going to get 6 months, maybe 600 miles out of a pair of shoes. That's a lot of trips across Woodcock Dam, so at a walking pace. So they are going to last a while, but the materials in them will break down. Anybody that's kept a pair of running shoes and they sort of went through the walking phase, and then they were not so good phase, and then they washed the car, then they worked in the garden, and then they fell apart. You know that they'll last quite a while before they actually fall apart. And well before that point, you've crushed the shoe or twisted it up or ruined the shoe. So as I said, stretching, making sure your shoes are in good shape. And then if you do have some issues with it, ice and heat. When you get back, if you start to have the heel pain, 15 minutes of ice, 15 minutes of heat to that heel goes a long way. If it still hurts, you're going to need to see a physician about it and evaluate it to make sure nothing else is going on there. But it's one of the more common things that we see that you can start to treat yourself. Right along with that, Achilles tendonitis. Pain in the back of the heel, right where the big Achilles tendon comes down to the heel. It either rubs on the shoes or it comes back to that tight calf muscle again in the back. It's overused early on, whether it's walking or running, and so it's a hard one to heal up because it can take several weeks, even a month, to heal a really acute case of Achilles tendonitis. Usually the first thing is the stretching exercises for the calf muscle, and then ice and heat, and a lot of times we'll put a heel lift in both sides. You can't do just one side, but a heel lift in both sides so you don't walk in circles after you try to heal it up. The other thing about it is that if you're going to do the ice and heat to that, you want to make sure that you stretch first. You would never want to ice your Achilles tendon and then say, oh, I forgot to stretch, and try to stretch out that really stiff, tight Achilles tendon. You'd want to stretch it out maybe after you rode a bicycle or something that didn't put as much stress on it as walking, and then hit it with the ice and heat. But that's probably one of the more common ones that we see. In running, this time of year, all whether it's high school or college, they're going into spring track season. So they've been running sort of casually indoors and then building up to going outdoors. But after the first couple races, usually you see tight calf muscles and Achilles tendonitis, because they go from a training shoe that looks like this to a pair of spikes that has no heel on it, a very flat shoe, and they're running at race pace. It's going to lower the heel down to the ground, a lot lower than what this is. These have about a 1/2 inch lift to 3/8 of an inch. Spike doesn't have that at all. In fact, it almost is a little bit of a negative heel. So it puts a lot more strain on the Achilles tendon, and you see tight calf muscles, sore calf muscles, and the Achilles tendonitis, whether it's your casual walker or in high school, starting with track. The other real common one that we'll see, especially in walkers, are toenails that turn black. The fancy name would be a subungual hematoma, but it's a toenail that became bruised. And you're thinking, well, how the heck did I bruise my toenail? I didn't hit anything. I didn't kick anything. Nobody stepped on my foot. Well, what usually happens is that you get micro trauma to the nail. So if you're, instead of walking across Woodcock Dam, you're taking the trails and you're going up and down like this as you walk, your foot's sliding forward into your shoe a little bit, catching on the end of your sock or the very end of your shoe, and it's just lifting that nail, lifting a little bit at a time. And that eventually causes bruising up underneath the toenail, which looks black because it lifts it up off, and you get a buildup of drainage underneath it, and causes pain. While there's pressure there, it may dry itself, it may need to be drained, but you end up with a black toenail. Probably the more common way is if you see like the Pittsburgh half marathons coming up, a marathon. If it's a rainy day, I'll see more athletes with that condition, because in the rain, their foot's going to get wet inside their shoe, the foot slips inside the shoe, and now as they trying to grip the inside, you're going to get that micro trauma to the end of their toenails, or again against their sock, or they're going to slip inside the shoe. Especially going up and down the hills of Pittsburgh, you're going to see the foot slide forward. So you'll see that more of that condition. Of course, the way to avoid it, make sure your shoes are laced up tight through the instep, through the top there. Make sure they're a long enough shoe. Especially runners are notorious for wearing shoes that just fit, just at the end of their toes. And they're a lot more likely to have that condition than if you have that traditional thumb width at the end of your shoe between your toes and where the shoe ends. Watch that your socks don't fit too tightly over the end of your toes. A little looser fitting sock in the toe box will accommodate that better. If it's a real tight elastic sock, sometimes you can get the micro trauma and pull the nail up. Shin splints. What the heck are shin splints? They're a pretty popular name. You hear say, "Oh, I had shin splints." What are really shin splints? Shin splints go together with another condition, which is a tendonitis of the posterior tibial tendon, which is a big tendon that comes down the inside of your ankle. And its job is to try and lift your arch. And it ends up on the inside of your foot, just below the ankle. It goes right behind the inside of your ankle bone, and then ends up in the inside of your shin. The muscle is actually right up on the inside of the shin. And so if somebody points to shin splints, they're usually pointing right on the inside of their shin, about halfway down their lower leg. And the reason it hurts there is that's where the muscle is. The tendon can be inflamed down below it, but the muscle up where it's trying to attach to the bone up there, that's where it gets really inflamed. And so if someone is increasing mileage too quickly, or increasing their walking mileage too quickly, or their foot rolls in and pronates too much, and their shoes aren't helping any of that out, it puts a lot of stress on that tendon. And the tendon transfers all that stress right up to the muscle on the side of the shin, and you get sharp and burning pain. And if it goes long enough, you end up with the next condition, which is a stress fracture up in that area. So it's more common in runners, especially high school runners, than it is in walkers. It's not a condition. We'll see more pain of where the tendon attaches to the foot. In walkers, we'll see more problems with the actual shin splints up in the side of the leg with runners. Well, what do you do about it? Well, initially, you're going to do ice and heat to that area. If it's been going on for a while, you may have to have an x-ray to make sure you don't have a stress fracture. But it really comes down to the biomechanics. It comes down to when you're standing there or walking, your foot, what position's your foot in? Is it rolled to the inside, and a lot of people would call that flat feet? Or is it sort of neutral in the middle? Or do you have a foot that's sort of cupped to the outside? Most of the people that you're going to see, the foot rolls in too much. When you stand, instead of being squared up, it rolls to the inside. And that extra is called pronation to the inside, puts a lot of stress on the tendon, that posterior tibial tendon, and the arch. So it goes hand in hand with that other condition I talked about, plantar fasciitis. If that foot pronates too much, it causes both those conditions. You're going to inherit that. If you have feet that look like that, you can go back and thank a grandparent, find an uncle that has a feet just like you do. And if they were active, they probably had some of the same conditions that you're going to have with that foot type. So does it mean that you can't exercise? No. It means that you may have to put some correction into the shoe in order to be able to exercise. And we see that with young kids in track and running cross country. I see it with dancers. You see it with soccer players, baseball players. Those conditions transcend all those sports in kids and young adults right up through adults and walking and running. So when people come into my office with that condition, what do? Well, first you address what hurts, right? You want to get rid of the pain, and that involves ice and heat and taping and things like that. And you may have to do some cross-training, meaning if you're walking or running, you may have to ride an exercise bike for a while or use an elliptical that takes some of those stresses away but still allows you to do some aerobic activity. And then we look at your shoes to see if you've got the right shoe that's giving you the amount of support and is a shoe that's firm enough midsole to it, which we'll talk about. And then we're going to look at the foot itself and see if we need to put some orthotics or inserts into that shoe. Eyeglasses for your feet is what those are, and we'll look at a pair in a minute. But that's going to correct the foot enough that it takes the stress off that tendon on the inside. It takes the stress off the plantar fascia and allows you as an athlete to walk and run without putting extra amount of stress on that condition. So it may take somebody that can say, you know, I can only walk a couple miles before I get shin splints, and now they can walk 5 or 6 miles without a problem. So it helps their biomechanics to be more efficient, and it prevents the injuries from occurring. Anybody have any questions on that portion of it? About, you threw a lot of terms around there for plantar fasciitis and posterior tibial tendonitis and all. So if we're going to look at shoes, what we want to look at is the way the shoes are made. And so these are some shoes I brought, but I want some shoes from everybody else. So if everybody would hand me a shoe, hand me a shoe, and we'll look at what we have everybody in the room has, and we'll look at what I brought. It's fine. No, they're all good. Bring them right over. I'm collecting one of everything here. I promise to give them back with them. Thank you very much. I think I know which one's yours. All right. So this is a collection of shoes that we have. Some I brought and some from our audience. So if we start off with a shoe, we'll look at a way a running shoe is made. And when they talk about shoe, the first thing they talk about is the last of the shoe. And the last refers of two things, the shape of it on the bottom and the way it's made on the inside, okay? So the last of the shoe, as far as shape, comes in 3 types. There's a regular last, like this one, that has a little bit of a curve to it. There's a straight lasted shoe, which we don't have any of here, that instead of being a little curved, it's actually almost perfectly straight ahead. And then a curved last shoe, where the shoe curves around a lot. This one isn't even one of those. Think of if you've ever seen a racing shoe, like someone would wear on a track. where the shoe curves in quite a bit at the front, and that would be a curved last shoe. Most of the ones that you're going to walk in are going to be a regular last. You might find a straight lasted shoe for some brands, but it's going to be this regular sort of curved, just a little bit of a curved, semi-curved last to it. When you look at the inside of the shoe and you pull out that insole that's in there, there's three ways the shoe's made. There's a slip lasted, which is you look at the bottom and there's a stitching right down, and I'm not sure we even have one up here. There's stitching right down the middle of the shoe. There'd be a stitch line right down the middle of the shoe. So they take the upper, which is this part, curl it around, and they stitch it right up the middle. It makes for a really nice glove fit to the shoe, but doesn't provide a lot of stability. So the other way they can do it is they do a board last. And this you can see is nice and flat in the inside of it. Sort of, it's a blue board in here, and it's flat the whole way up. And it's been stitched around the outside. So if you want the best of both, you use a combination last, which is the stitching in the bottom, then over top of it, they put this board. What that board does is it adds torsional stability to the shoe. So when we pick up this shoe and we take it in the store, we don't want to be able to twist this shoe this way, okay? We want the shoe to be stable side to side. We don't want it to bend in here. So if we took this shoe, you see, we can really bend this shoe back and forth, okay? That's fine for what the shoe is made for, but it's not good in a running or walking shoe. We want torsional stability to the shoe right across there, okay? We're going to look at the heel counter. The heel counter is this part right around the back here. We want a nice firm heel counter. Solid, it's plastic. It's going to cup and support the heel while we walk or run, as opposed to, you can take some shoes like this, you see, and I can collapse the heel counter around here and collapse it this way. I can also take this shoe and I can twist it this way, and I can twist it that way. So if you go to walk in this shoe, your foot sort of collapsing to the inside and the heel collapses to this way and the heel counter goes down. You see, this is a minimalist shoe, and it's great to just sort of kick around in. And you have to, if you're going to run in this or walk in, and have pretty close to perfect biomechanics, because there's just no support to this shoe. It's just not, you can see, this shoe's going to twist. As your foot twists, it's going to give, the heel counter is going to give to the inside, and the whole shoe is sort of going to collapse like this, okay? Now, the one thing this shoe does... okay. One thing that you can look at with this shoe is the flexibility of the forefoot. See, it bends quite nicely. And we want to see that out of the other shoes. We want them to flex. So there's flex points around the front of this shoe, all these. And so that's going to allow the shoe to flex underneath the ball of the foot like we want it to. The materials in the midsole, which is everything between the bottom, which is outsole, and the top, this is the midsole, well, this whole white section here. And midsoles come in a couple of different qualities. There would be a soft or neutral ride to a shoe. There's a motion control, and then there's a firm anti-pronation shoe. So the difference is this, is if this whole thing is real soft and cushy, that's sort of a neutral shoe. If it's firmer on one side or the other, usually the inside, that would control the motion of the foot, and that would be a motion control shoe. If the whole thing is very firm, then it's going to be a anti-pronation shoe. So what are we really looking at? So if I take my thumb and I push it into the midsole here, see, it doesn't want to give, okay? If I try these shoes, it doesn't want to give. If I try this shoe, you see, if I were to land on that as a heel striker, it wants to give a little bit. So this midsole is going to compress too much. As you land on it, it's going to want to squish down too much as you land on it, and as your foot rolls in, it does it too fast, and it also adds a little bit of a rocking motion that your tendons have to control as you land on that shoe. So for most people, you're going to want a motion control shoe. And you can tell it by, you can check it here, it's firmer on the outside, but it's really firm on the inside. What they did was they put two different densities of material. They call it durometer material. So low durometer is soft, high durometer is hard. So what they do is combine a soft material out here, a softer, but not too soft, and real firm here. So as your foot comes in, lands and rolls in, it meets that nice firm material and doesn't allow that foot to come in and pronate as quickly as it would otherwise. It's a very stable shoe. This shoe is not going to rock around when you land on it, nor is this Asics. So if we, well, it's a Reebok, excuse me. So if we took this Reebok, you see, it's sort of good on that, okay? It collapses a little bit more than we like. There's good flexibility up here. It's really soft here, okay? And it's a little bit broken down. This corner's been crushed a little bit. Heel counter, really pretty good, okay? In the inside, if we look inside, it's got a board last to it. So this would be a shoe that's somewhere in between stable and cushioned, because it's really a pretty darn soft midsole. If you're going to run in this shoe, it's a little bit soft. You could probably use it as a walking shoe, but it might be a little bit soft for most people to run in, meaning the midsole in there is a little bit too soft. The New Balance shoe, we talked about this. This is a minimalist shoe. Great to kick around in. You might use it if you're young to race in. If you took most people and sent them out to run in this shoe, they would probably become injured. It's just not a stable enough shoe. It's going to give too much. They're going to need more stability to it. This shoe, again, torsional stability. We see it's got good flexibility. The midsole's pretty darn firm. Good heel counter. And you can do all these things in the shoe store when you go in. This Asics, the difference with this one is it's a winter shoe, so it's got a Gore-Tex upper to it, as opposed to these are really breathable, which is great in the summer, but not so great this last winter when it was 5 degrees, because you're going to freeze your foot. So this one's going to keep out some water. It's going to keep out some of the cold. The trade-off is weight. If you're walking in the shoe, the weight doesn't mean a whole lot. If you're running the shoe, the difference between 11, 12 ounces, 10 ounces, and 9.5 is actually significant. You're going to notice the difference if you try to run in that difference of a shoe. If we look at your basic, kick around moccasin, okay? It's got a Vibram outsole to it. It's actually got pretty good stability here, doesn't it, okay? The midsole, pretty darn firm, bends at the front. Heel counter, not so much, okay? But it's made to ride in the car with. You're not going to go out and walk Woodcock Dam in this shoe without having problems. Now, the difference between that and your basic loafer, okay? Just meant to stand around in, ride in the car in. You're not going to want to walk Woodcock Dam in it because the whole thing, folds up. But it looks a lot better if you're going to go out in it than what these do. High heel, they're really good for my business, okay? Highly recommend these. So, nowadays what you find that women nowadays go from a heel of maybe 1 or 2 inches to a pair of flip-flops, up to what, a 4-inch heel, maybe 5-inch heel, then down to flip-flops, and then to a running shoe. Shoe heights are up and down all the time. If you went back to the 1940s, women wore about a 2-inch heel, but they wore it all the time. They wore it from, they got up in the morning till they went to bed at night. You always wore heels. And so you got shortening of those Achilles tendons in the back. And a lot of those ladies had issues when we tried to switch them later in life to a walking shoe, had to put heel lifts in them because of that. But the biggest thing is if you're going to go up and down in shoes, if you're going to go from walking to high heels into your walking or running shoe, you got to work on that calf flexibility. You got to keep those calf muscles flexible and do the exercises. One of the things that you want to avoid, since I've emphasized that stretch a lot, is stretching over steps. A lot of people get way too aggressive and stretch over steps, and they stand on a step and put their heels down over the edge of it. Way too aggressive for most anybody that's not in high school. Most of us would find that stretch to cause more injury than it's going to help with it. So that's what's sort of traditional about it. To close, one of the cool new things that we found is that is the tuning of midsoles, meaning that this material now, the shoe companies are working on tuning this. And the idea is, how much energy does this absorb or not absorb? What if this shoe rebounded a little bit? What if this shoe didn't have a spring, but only took up 30% of the energy and was tuned so that when you landed on it, you felt not spring, but at least you didn't feel like all the energy was absorbed down into the shoe. And that's where the shoe companies are headed. In the future, I think what you're going to find is that you're going to go into a shoe store and you're going to try on several different brands of shoes or models, and you'll find that those shoes are tuned to different people. Meaning you'll wear one shoe and you go, this doesn't feel so good. You'll put on another shoe and you'll find, wow, I feel like I can walk in this shoe and I'm getting some energy back from the midsole. And so you'll be able to choose what shoe feels good for you based on what this midsole is giving you back. Nike had their 2-hour project. It was to break the 2-hour marathon. And it was sort of a space race of, if you want to call it that, where they did experiments in drafting and tracks and what the track did and weather. But part of that was the development of shoes. And they had some shoes that would be illegal to race in because of the amount of energy they gave back. But the spin-off on that was they have shoes that you can buy that are, instead of losing 60% of the energy, maybe you're only going to lose 30%. So that's where shoes are headed, and that's sort of exciting. I don't think they're going to be cheaper than what they are now. I can't imagine what they're going to cost, but I think in the end it'll be worth it.
Does Dunham's sell the illegal ones?
The illegal? I think you have to special order those. Yeah. What questions do we have? Yes?
Where do you buy your shoes, John?
You know, I have bought some at Dunham's up there. I've bought some up at Erie at the stores. Of course, internet. You know, do I buy them on the internet or do I go to a store? I'll usually go to a store and buy shoes, at least a few pairs of them there, so I know what's going to fit. If you're going to buy a second pair of shoes, and you can go on, you know, one of the big retailers online that have athletic shoes, and you know, okay, I wear this model and this size, you know exactly what you want, it works. If you're going to order a pair of shoes off the internet and you don't know that, and you've never tried them on, a lot of times it doesn't work out because you don't know what that shoe's, how it's going to fit. You don't know the ride of the shoe. So I will use some of the local stores in Erie. You know, there's the Erie Sports Store, there's the Achilles, there's, you name them up there. In Meadville, you could go to Dunham's. If you're going south, you know, you can go down to Sharon. But it's important to try on a few pairs of shoes. And so till you know exactly what you want to wear, then it's a good idea to try them on. Usually you'll try on 5 brands and you'll say, 2 of these don't work, but 3 of these I could choose from because I think they're going to fit the volume of my foot and the shape of my foot. Then you can choose from those. So what I'm really saying there is there's no one brand of shoe that I recommend, because that's always a question. You know, what brand or what shoe do you recommend? What brand fits your foot, and what one do they make within that brand works for you? Yes?
Going off this question, do you have any thoughts on the expertise of the staff at the Achilles running shop?
You know, I've worked with them before, and most of the time they do a very good job up there at fitting you and looking at your foot type. If you go to some of the larger cities, or if you go to State College and there's stores there where they have a lot of very professional people that are going to fit you differently than if you walk in and pick something off the shelf with it. I taught you how to look and identify the wrong, you know, what to pick on this, but sometimes someone in one of the stores go, you know what, I've got another shoe that fits very similar to this shoe that you're already trying on, and they can guide you the right direction. And so, and they're going to have 2 or 3 different brands to choose from with it. Yes?
How about insoles?
With the insoles for the shoes, and I didn't pull out some of these, the ones that come with the shoe are generic, with the exception of some of the ones that are contoured to the foot. The aftermarket ones are just going to be an arch support. And they can be, the arch support part of it is very generic. It's made for everybody, doesn't fit anybody. What we usually do yeah, thank you. One of the shoes I didn't collect. So what do I do? Well, we do orthotics or customized insoles for shoes, and it's based on the biomechanics. So if someone comes in and has a history of Achilles tendonitis or plantar fasciitis or the shin splints, and we're going to look at it and say, okay, why did this occur? So half of it is, of course, curing the injury. The other half of it is, why did it occur, and let's not do it again, okay? Because if you're going to go out and walk and do the same thing all over again, you're probably going to have the same injury all over again. So after you evaluate the biomechanics, then you can make a custom insert for the shoe. And it's an orthotic. It's made out of plastic. Sounds hard, but if you put it on the counter, it flexes up and down quite nicely. So think of it, how it functions under 3 to 6 times your body weight, which is 3 times when you land on it walking, about 6 times if you're going to run on it. So how does that device flex under 3 to 6 times your body weight? This is another type of it. Again, plastic, but if you put it on the counter, it flexes. Both these, as well as this insole, have all been, this was modified to correct the mechanics of the foot, so that we're trying to prevent injuries from stretching and doing the smart thing as far as how fast you build up walking and running, and then looking at the biomechanics with it. What questions? Yes?
How long should you run on a pair of running shoes before they need to be or should be replaced?
That's a great question. How long can you run on a pair of shoes? There's 2 parts to that. One is how long the midsole is going to last as far as before it's crushed, which is this part here. And the other part of it is I don't run very much at all or walk very much at all. How long can I keep them before they finally dry rot? Okay? So if you're going to buy a new shoe and you're going to say, I'm walking Woodcock Dam in them, you know, they're going to last you a season. They're going to last you through the summer. They probably need to be replaced. If someone comes in and they stand on their feet for a living, they're a nurse. I say 6 months. You know, those shoes that you're wearing on the floor, 6 months, they're done, your feet are worth it. They're standing behind a machine, 6 months. I know those boots aren't worn out. They don't look worn out, but they're all stretched out of shape, about 6 months, maybe 8 at the most. If you're going to run in them, 600, 700 miles, somewhere in there. You won't know till you do a log, if you were to log it all down, but you get an idea. 6 months to a year. After a year, if you're using those, they're definitely shot. Do there holes in them? No. No holes in them. What you'll find is they're twisted out of shape. They're twisted in. You know, you put it on the counter and the shoe sits there like that, okay? It's been twisted out of shape. With all the new materials, it's really hard to put a hole in the bottom of the shoe, hole through maybe your toe through the top. They just don't wear out like the shoes used to wear out. So figure 6 months to a year, and then maybe 600 to 1,000 miles on a pair of shoes. And then they're done. With one exception. If you're a heel striker, meaning when you walk, if you wear off the heel of your shoe a lot, which is this outside corner here, you can wear this out well before the rest of the shoe. If this black material, this outsole material, which is Indy 500 outsole rubber, wears out and you see that you're into this midsole, the shoe's done. No matter what else is going on with the shoe, if you wear out that corner, you've got to throw out the shoe. Because otherwise the angle that your heel is going to come down at is going to be really extreme, and you're going to have an injury from that.
So unless you have perfect body mechanics,
yes,
you really should be buying orthotics, getting...
You know, you can function, you don't have to have orthotics in the sense that you have a biomechanical limit, so that you may be able to go out and walk the dam 2 miles, and you'd come back and I'm just fine. And yet your foot pronates and does some of these things. So I'm not saying everybody needs orthotics, but the further you're going to push yourself, meaning, okay, instead of 2 miles, I'm going to try and walk 4 or 5, now that's going to show up. Now those, whether you overpronate or not, that's going to make a difference. So even running, everybody in high school doesn't need orthotics, but there's a significant number of athletes that I see that do, or even at a college level. Maybe it doesn't even show up till they start to run in college, and instead of running 30 or 40 miles a week, they're running 50 or 60. Then we say, wait a minute here, your mechanics are what's going to stop you with the injuries. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Is there a lifespan for the orthotics? Did they wear out? Is there a time whenever they're done?
The ones without a top cover will last quite a while unless your dog eats them. Dogs love these things, okay? For some reason, they love them. So this top cover can wear out. The plastic really won't wear out. This type of device is pretty much indestructible. I'll get these back in 5 or 6 years, 2,000 or 3,000 miles on them, maybe 4,000 or 5,000, and refurbish them, have them sent back to a lab, refurbish them, out the door they go again. So they can last years and years, depending on the materials. Orthotics are something a little bit like glasses. If your glasses don't work, you don't say, I don't need glasses. You say, well, something's wrong with the way my glasses were made. Well, if you have orthotics and you say, well, they're not working, chances are something needed to be changed with the orthotic from the beginning. So many people try them. They may have bought some that were over the counter or something and say, well, they didn't work. Well, the materials weren't right. Something was wrong in that mix.
Does a 3/4 length one like that, is it going to stay in place on its own, or do you need to put a piece of tape or something to hold it from moving around in the shoe?
This length of device, because you're standing on it, stays in place. And the material on the bottom will actually stick to the shoe. It won't slide forward in there. This is one that you stand on. This is actually ends up under the sulcus or right up behind the toes. The ones that are back a little bit further, back into here, a lot of times we'll trim the insole. It's a little arts and crafts project for the athlete where I show them how to trim the insole, drop the orthotic in the bottom, and it's locked into the shoe. It can't go forward or can't go back in there. Orthotics work when you forget they're in there. You don't even know they're in there. So, well, thank you very much. I wish everybody healthy feet. Was there one more question? Yeah, absolutely. Have a good evening.
Well, thanks, Dr. Zeigler. That was excellent. So if you have those issues, give Dr. Zeigler's office a call. He can help you get them fixed, 724-6060. Well, thanks for joining us today on Medicine in Meadville. We'll talk to you next time.